Hey, everybody, and welcome to the For Female Founders podcast series, where we are helping women in business learn to thrive, not just survive. I am your host, Sarah Bundy, and today we have Shelagh Cummins with us. Shelagh is a business strategist and TEDx speaker with over a decade of experience helping women entrepreneurs build profitable, scalable businesses without burnout. As the founder and CEO of The Road to Seven, she has guided thousands of women in accessing the capital, systems, and support they need to grow and thrive. Known for her candid, no-nonsense approach, Shelagh is passionate about redefining success and equipping women with the tools to build wealth, lead confidently, and create businesses that fuel their freedom. Shelagh, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I love so much that you are spending your time and life helping women hit 7 digits and up. I think it's a wonderful initiative. It's a wonderful purpose. There's not a lot of people who are out there specializing in it. So we can't wait to learn more about how you're doing that for people. But why don't you start off by telling us a little bit more about you and how you got into doing this? With Awin's marketing technology platform, you can easily discover the best partners who connect you with huge audiences of new customers. Understand how your partnerships are performing with intuitive reporting and only pay for the results you need. Start today and grow your own way with Awin.
Well, I am absolutely an accidental entrepreneur. There's nothing about this that was planned or forecasted. I am self-educated along the way in the area of businesses. However, I'm highly educated in the area of education. I have a master's in education and curriculum teaching and learning. And one of the things I love doing more than anything else is taking a piece of content and making it attainable for a wide audience. And I had been doing that in the classroom for over 13 years. And then when I returned to teaching after my mat leave, two things happened that day. One, I realized that it was time for me to exit teaching because I had lost the passion and I really wanted to focus on raising my children instead of raising a classroom full of children. And I was kind of a little bit bored at the same time. And the second thing that happened that day is we figured out we were pregnant with our second. And so I sort of took that last year of my teaching career and really did some soul searching in terms of what else can I do? And it all came down to numbers to get started. And it was, how can I stay home and be a primary caregiver for my children? I had two kids that were 18 months apart, and it was quite cost prohibitive to put them both in daycare and go back to teaching. And so the deal with my husband was I had to make a certain amount every month to keep contributing into our family. And then I could stay home. And that's how we were going to keep us afloat. And so that kickstarted a whole journey of exploration into, where do I bring value in the world? What am I good at? How can I make money doing what I'm good at? And there was quite a lot of false starts along the way. But each false start had its own role and contribution in what I call my Master's of Business Oops. So it's an MBO, and it cost me a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy. I do not have a certificate in it, although I wear it as a badge of honor, because each of those fails, if you will, or false starts, all had a little nugget in there for the next step. And so I tried a whole bunch of things, and then it all sort of came together. I had a parenting blog, which was making money, but I wasn't loving, but I learned the entire online space through that. And not to age myself, but that's when Facebook was becoming a thing and blogging was like this totally new random thing that nobody had heard of before. So that just gives you a little bit of a glimpse into the time frame of it. And then like the magic happens when you actually have this new thing called Twitter. Twitter's so cool. You have to speak in 140 characters and you put them all together. And then you get found online, which is this whole new thing. So it allowed me to learn that space. I had a tutoring company, didn't love the work, but I was full. So was starting to hire and put other people into tutoring gigs. So I sort of learned structure a little bit that way, team building. But I also was designing and developing courses for a corporate training company, which enabled me and gave me the gift of reading so many books and taking so many courses on different subjects. And then I would put them through the Shelagh lens and then, develop a course based on all the different findings. So it was sort of like a merging of all three of those worlds when I was emceeing a women's entrepreneurial conference, and I was giving a training in between each speaker as the segue. And I was speaking to an audience of women. I was pregnant again by that time. And at the end of that day, someone said, Sheila, I'd like to hire you. And I was like, oh, what for? Do you want me to do some training or some education? And she was like, no, I'd like you to help me increase my sales. And I was like, I have never done anything like that, but why don't we try? And it's been 16 years.
Wow, I love that so much. Well, it's interesting how we fall into these things by accident sometimes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of women will actually resonate with your startup story too, of starting a business to contribute to the family income while you're raising little children.
Yeah.
Same thing for me. I started my company when I was 6 months pregnant with the intention of contributing to the family income. Didn't expect it to explode as much as it had, and it ended up being the breadwinning main focus of our family for almost 16 years afterwards. So all the ladies out there who are listening, if you have little kids, if you're kind of falling into it by accident, maybe it's happening.
Or necessity
happening for a reason. It's great that you kind of are there. And, you look at people like Sheila and I, and you can go from A to B successfully over time. So keep going. You guys are doing great. And I appreciate that background, Sheila. Thank you. I also appreciate the whole idea of, sometimes you just learn as you go, and adversity. I like to call it the university of adversity. So we all get to go to this university of adversity and somehow get these masters in understanding how to get through difficult things and learn as we go. But life experience goes an extremely long way, and there is value and credit to being able to go through the trenches. And I love that you've been able to do that and have someone see that value and say, hey, please help me with learning how to grow my sales. So great starter story. Thank you so much. And so with the Road to 7, you're now helping female entrepreneurs go from the 4 digits, 5 digits, 6 digits into 7 digits. Is that correct? Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your current business and what is it that you're helping people do? A great big thank you to our sponsors, PartnerStack. PartnerStack's ecosystem connects you to the world's largest B2B network for you to earn, connect, and grow.
Yeah, for sure. So we sort of work with two main groups of women, or people who identify as women. We love everyone. And the first group we help in the growth phase of their business. And it's a very underrated phase, but it's the one thing that's going to get you to the point where you can pay yourself a consistent salary, a livable salary, so that this business is more than a side hustle. It probably isn't yet big enough for an outside investor. And so in growth, we focus on very key aspects of the company. And I always talk about it through the lens of the art and science of business. The science is simply the systems, the processes, the universal truths that have to happen. You have to have an offer, you have to be marketing, you need to be making sales, and you need to have profit in there. And then there's also the art of it, which is the inner workings, the mindset, how you identify, where you're holding yourself back, what's stopping you, what are you choosing to see as fact, which is really just a belief, or it's all the inside. It's the inside job of running the business. And so we look at both sides of those in terms of growth. And we have sort of two metrics that we're tracking. One is the 12%. So our goal is to increase the number of women entrepreneurs that are able to get over 6 figures to be higher than 12%. Our first goal is to hit 15%. And the reason that's important is it doesn't matter how much money your company makes. It matters that the money your company makes supports you and your lifestyle that you desire, and that it's worth it. And what we know is there is an astounding statistic of, I think it's 88% or 87% of women entrepreneurs are living below the poverty level because their revenue is not high enough to sustain their life. And they're sacrificing their financial freedom, their personal freedom, their security, their family's livelihood, so that they are in service to others, so they can have their business and have time flexibility. And I actually believe that you can do both. Mm-hmm. You can have time flexibility and it can pay you what you need. So that's the first group that we work with. And that's the first statistic that we're challenging. The second statistic is the 2%, and that's 2% of women entrepreneurs ever get past 7 figures. And again, it's not about having a 7-figure business. I don't care what your revenue is, but once you get, into the mid 6 figures, things start happening. You start having enough money to be able to hire. You don't have to be the main ticket anymore. You can start building in a strategic team so that you can serve more people while maintaining the time flexibility. So first, we've got to get you up and over the 6-figure and get you to multi-6. And the second is to get you up and over 7. And one of our core values is we're going to meet you where you are, and we're going to bring you where you want to go. And at the end of the day, all we care about is that the business works for that woman.
I think that's really important to bring up and actually hone in on, because in the last 3 or 4 conversations I've had with women in business, they've been talking about how success is defined very differently for women in business as it is for men in business, which is actually very interesting to me. There's a lady that I spoke to a week ago, and she said, I don't need to grow. I just need to be able to take care of my energy management and pay my bills. And if I can be stress-free and healthy and take care of my bills, that is hugely successful to me. And she is happy with that. What are some of the other definitions of success that you see with these ladies who are coming as they are, and you're meeting them where they are, and then you're helping them achieve more of whatever it is that they're pursuing?
Yeah, that's such a great question. The very first barometer of success that I notice many women are using is one of time flexibility. I think until you're at scale and you have a very large company, it's pretty tricky to be talking about time freedom. Time freedom meaning you don't really have to work. You can pick and choose if you're going to work. And unless you're sitting in an investor seat and somebody else is making money for you, there you really don't have time freedom. But time flexibility, I define it as the ability to pick and choose when you work and what work you're doing based on your availability, based on your obligations outside of your company. And that is actually what I notice most women are measuring their barometer of success by. The second one is impact. We know that women build companies that are predominantly of service to others. I would suggest an incredibly large portion have a philanthropic angle to it. And there's a degree of success of the amount of impact that a company can have. And then obviously in there is some revenue goals or successful revenue where it's profitable and you're not operating from the 0 marker every single month. And, I think that as we grow and evolve, the markers grow and evolve with us, and they shift as priorities around us shift, time constraints around us shift, financial constraints shift. And I think that there's a fluidity to what women bring to the marketplace. And I also think it's interesting that very few women are building companies that have the space and room for outside investors. And so accessing capital can be very tricky because, I've been in so many rooms where it's like, you never build your business on your own dollar. Well, women don't really have a choice because of how their companies are structured and where they're starting from. And I think that'll probably segue us into your next question. So I'll let you ask it. But, that accessing capital, we just don't fit the mold.
Right. And we will absolutely talk about that because it is one of the biggest challenges that women in business do have. But I think you bring up 3 really important things. And maybe we look at this as like a little ecosystem of success for women in business where time flexibility and time freedom is a major motivator and driving factor for us. Secondly, is the impact and philanthropy piece of it. And when I think about my third company, which I started, which is Athena Collective, that was a big motivator for me. I wanted to make a positive difference at scale. And you've also touched on, a lot of women in business are in service of others. And when they can be successful doing so, then they can actually make a way bigger impact that has a long-term ripple effect. And it ultimately makes the world a better place, right? Mm-hmm. So if we can collectively take care of women in business, they can take care of their families, they can take care of their communities. And it has this incredible ripple effect that isn't really measurable. It is immeasurable, but it does actually shift things for the better, for humanity, for society, for the environment, for whatever it is that they're pursuing. But we also need to think about revenue and profits And are we cash flow positive?
Mm-hmm.
And can we scale? And what are we going to do with those funds? Because when we have those funds, we have more flexibility to do more philanthropic work and make the world a better place again.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about the money side of the business.
Sure.
What do you feel are the biggest challenges that women have today when it comes to getting funding? And what are those biggest roadblocks that are keeping them from getting that funding?
Yeah. So the loan application and approval process for traditional financial institutions or our banks are built up on a very basic algorithm that was developed back in the 1950s. Mm. And at that time, if we look at society in North America, there was a high percentage of women that were stay-at-home moms and were home, and traditionally one person in the house would be the breadwinner. Those algorithms serve the people that were breadwinners, and they leverage collateral and assets that that person brings to the table. Fast forward, 75 years, our world looks very different. There is a much lower percentage of women who are staying home and not in the workforce, and with people living in big cities or anywhere on one salary. As the salaries have stayed the same, our cost of living has gone up, and it's becoming hard to do that. Mm-hmm. And so the basic algorithm is not set up to look at what most women are bringing to the table when they're going to ask for funding. So all loans are going to ask for your credit score, and they're going to ask for some type of collateral. The number of women versus the number of men who have collateral that's deemed creditworthy, i.e. a house, right, a second property, a car that they own, investments, the number of women that bring that to the table is exponentially lower than it is for men. And so by that default alone, women don't qualify. Secondly, when we look at credit scores, women are having to bootstrap the growth of their company, which is great. It means you don't have any debt. You're not leveraging anyone else's money. What it means is you are picking and choosing where the money's going. And what a lot of women have done is they've sacrificed their personal credit in order to build their company, because all business growth requires time, energy, and money. And so you put those two factors together, and it works against women. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because the other piece of this that I think is important is we have to look at the size and scope of our businesses. I said it right at the top. Very few women are building companies that have the room to grow to the point of having outside investors. Mm-hmm. And because they're so small, the size of loan that they are applying for actually undermines the cost of the bank to provide the loan. And so a lot of banks aren't really interested in talking to you about a commercial loan, until you're over 3 million in revenue. Well, that means less than 2%. And I actually think the number's less than people who get a number of women who get to 3 million. So you can't qualify for a commercial loan. And B, the size of loan, if you want a loan under $100,000 from some of our banks that are there for the entrepreneur, you can't even talk to someone to see how much you should be taking. And so you randomly ask for a random amount of money, and they're like, well, no, you don't fit the algorithm, but nobody's there to walk you through the process because they're focused on a larger sized company. And so there's just some discrepancy in the companies that women are building versus the algorithms. And that's one of the things that at the Road to Seven, we are working really hard is to figure out a different algorithm that plays more fairly with the women's companies that they're bringing to the table when they ask for a loan.
Let's talk a little bit about that then. What are the different variables that we should be considering in that algorithm? And let's say women don't qualify for that type of funding. What mm-hmm. other types of funding options are available to women, even if they don't want to bootstrap?
Right. So I'm going to actually answer the second question first. Right. From what we found, not a lot. Not a lot. So alternate lending is an option. finding people who will lend you the money. We do lending. We do alternate lending. There are some criteria we need to have in place. Number one, you've got to be up and over 6 figures already and have been so for over 2 years. That means we're talking to a very small percentage of the population of women entrepreneurs.
Right.
And we want to make sure that that strategic investment is going to go somewhere in your growth or in your scale to bring you to the next level. And so the first part of the question is, what do you need to bring to the table? Well, the very first thing we need is positive cash flow. And that, right where we started can be really tricky. In this economic time alone, there's a lot of uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty, it means buyers are uncertain and are a little bit slower in making their buying decision. And so a lot of the women that we're working with are having to strengthen their marketing, strengthen their messaging, rely a little bit more on personal offers and DMs and messaging, and in order to really build that trust and credibility with their audience. That takes time. Right. That takes resources. So cash flow positive, staying up to date with taxes in North America. The countries that make up North America have this new AI tool that they're using to go through tax returns. And so there's an exponential increase in people being audited and having to go back to 2022, 21, 20, 2019, 2018, and looking at discrepancy in their filing. And so there's a lot of people that are owing a lot of money to, in our country, the Canadian Revenue Agency, because they are really honing in on the small business. And so one of the things we need with our fund is you have to be up to date with the CRA. And we're starting to be a little bit more flexible with that because there are some unfair advantages, I would say, at the moment working against small business. But really, we want your company cash flow positive. We want proof of growth. We want to be seeing your making sure that you're not up to your eyeballs in debt and you're using this debt to support the debt that's supporting the other debt. At some point you've got to stop and say, whoa, I'm not taking on any more debt. And the other thing, and Sarah, this is the piece that I never forecasted when I started this lending company, is women's resistance to taking on healthy debt. And if you talk to any man who's growing his business, of the ones I've spoken to, there's no hesitancy at all about leveraging capital in order to support their growth. Somebody's offering them money, their answer is absolutely, when can I get it? Right. Women, I don't know if I should go into debt. I'm a little nervous about taking on a loan. And it really showcases that there's a lot of women that are incredibly nervous about taking a risk on themselves. And B, it showcases how many women have been brought up to think of debt as a bad thing, whereas we're leveraging capital as a tool for growth. And when you are making investments, we want them to be beyond the shadow of a doubt that this is a great investment with a high likelihood of generating an excellent return. And that's a different muscle. A lot of women don't have that muscle yet. And that's just, I never anticipated that as being one of the biggest challenges I would face as a lending company.
I've heard and seen the same things on my side. And I think you're absolutely right about women just having a fear. Like, they are terrified to take on debt. But also, to your point, you look at some of the most successful companies, you look at some of the fastest growing companies, you look at the most innovative companies, and they've all leveraged other people's money to invest in a company so that they can offset, grow exponentially, and then, kind of scale and grow together. It pays back over time.
And it's interesting because the number of women who I've spoken to are like, I just need, $25,000 to go and hire this person who I know is going to have a massive impact on increasing my sales and And I say, well, what capital do you have available to you? And they'll say, well, I have a line of credit, but I don't really want to touch it.
I know.
That's what it's for. So what happens is the growth of these companies ends up being way slower than their male counterparts. And that's one of the reasons I think people aren't getting past the 5-figure mark.
Okay, so let's talk about how women can get past that fear of leveraging capital, leveraging lines of credit, leveraging loans, and leveraging debt in order to invest in their organization so they can scale faster, so they can get cash flow positive. How do we shift that model?
So for one, I think it needs to be talked about more. I think we have a good track record of when we hear stories of success, we can see what's possible for others. And I think there are not a lot of women who have been successful by leveraging capital that are talking about that. So I think that that's an important piece of the storytelling. I also think that there's some work that we as women need to be doing in challenging our mindset around what's possible and taking a risk on ourselves. And many of us are not comfortable taking a risk on ourselves because nobody else has. And if nobody else is going to, then you're going to be the only one who can do it. And so I think that there's a lot of ways to poorly manage funds. And there are ways to manage funds in a way to fuel your growth. And a lot of it comes through mentorship, through coaching, through having advisory groups who you can pass ideas by doing your due diligence on service or software providers that are going to increase your efficiency or your revenue. And I think people get bought into the loudness of what's online. There's so much snake oil that's out there and everybody's out trying to make a buck off everybody else. And when you actually go back to basics and do your due diligence, there are some really great investments and excellent people and systems and processes that are not only going to increase your efficiency, but are going to have a direct impact on your bottom line. But if you're not willing to take the risk and try, then it's never going to happen.
That's it. And this seems to be an ongoing issue that's coming up even for me with this podcast. So we've made the decision to actually do a whole financial literacy series that's going to be coming out in the For Female Founders podcast series, because banks want people to not be afraid. Investment companies want people to not be afraid. Angel investors and VCs and PCs want people to not be afraid. And so we're going to start talking about it a lot more. And I think, Shelagh, this kickstarts a really, really important conversation. I love that you're talking about this. We are successful because we have overcome some of the fears of borrowing to grow really significant businesses over time. So I think it's wonderful that we're starting the conversation, and I appreciate you bringing these things to the table. Unfortunately, we are out of time for this time. I'd love to schedule another podcast in the future if you'd like to go again.
I'm all in.
Thank you. We appreciate you being here. Just for today, though, let's wrap up with some words of advice. What are some two or three tips that you can give women who are listening right now? Maybe they haven't hit that 6 digit. Maybe they are not cash flow positive yet. You mentioned some really valid roadblocks of when people don't want to invest in a company. How do we help them get over those humps?
Yeah. So the very first thing that I would love for your listeners to hear and feel into is the idea that if you can see it and you can visualize it, then it's possible. What you don't need to do is have the exact roadmap of how to make it happen, but how you make it happen is through one action at a time. And so when you can have that big vision of what it is that you want, it's a matter of saying, well, what is that one next step that I could take today? So that would be advice number 1. Advice number 2 is if you're in business and things aren't selling, it doesn't mean that you're not doing great work. It probably means that there's something that's not working in your offer, and your offer is not connecting with the people who need it the most. And so I beg you to just go back and work on the messaging and the program promise for your offer and really understand who you're selling it to. And then just keep opening conversations, because conversations get clients. And then the third and final thing is a price is a price is a price. There is no story behind a price that you put on what you sell. There's no emotion behind it. A price is binary. It's numbers. It's digits, ones and zeros that are put together to represent the value of what it is that you're selling. And so if you think you're going to win the right clients by underpricing and then over delivering, you're going to find yourself out of work very quickly, because you won't be able to afford to keep your company going. And if ever I have learned a lesson in business, it's that running a business is way more expensive than we think it is. And we're we're underpricing and undervaluing the cost of simply running the business, let alone profit, let alone having more than enough money, let alone being able to reinvest. So look at your pricing.
That's great, Shelagh. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your tips and insights. If anybody wants to contact you after the show, what's the best way to reach out to you?
I am alive and well on LinkedIn. Shelagh Cummins, SHELAGH Theroadto7.com is my website. And I hang out on Instagram as well, just not as well. I think I'm too old for Instagram.
Oh, good.
But I'm there.
Well, thank you, Shelagh. We appreciate having you on the show. And thank you for listening in, guys. We'll see you on the next show. Thanks for listening to the 4 Female Founders podcast series. If you enjoyed this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe, like, or comment below so we can continue to support women in business by helping them thrive, not just survive. We'll see you on the next show.